Hello, and welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching my channel. And hopefully you're going to enjoy today's journey. I get motivations from different places, and I tend to just kind of go with the flow and go with the motivation that might be a little bit different. I look at things a little bit differently. So when I did my video on the vintage flat top Sheaffers, I also showed my Schafer Connoisseur, and that encouraged me to buy another Connoisseur, which we'll look at later on in the video, but also to buy this pen that you see in front of you. Some of you may recognize it as a Schafer Targa. It was a model that was made by Sheaffer from 1976 to 1999, and it was made in 120 different styles and finishes. They all look the same primarily. They made a slimmer version, which was about 8 millimeters in diameter. This is 11. Here's the eBay auction that I won, and I thought the price was excellent. And I expected that this pen would have some challenges, and it does, but hopefully by the end of this video we'll see if I made a good decision. So this pen has been abused. This pen has been well used, as they described in the auction. So it's a Sheaffer USA. So the pen is all metal and it has a decent weight to it. You have the gold insert in the cap finial up top. You have another insert at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, this is just clean aesthetics, clean design. It's also a flat top pen. It's a pull-off cap. Seems to fit fairly well. And we'll see a really nice inlaid nib. It's a 14 karat gold inlaid nib. And it is looking like it's a little wonky, but we're going to work on straightening that out. But I wanted to show you the as received condition. The only thing that I've done is I flushed this out, which I do with all pens I get, new or old. Yeah, that takes that same Parker cartridge converter that they've used since the time that they started putting in and making cartridge converter pens. We're going to jump right into writing with this Schafer Targa pen. And it's certainly not what somebody would say was a Grail pen. But to me, I enjoy bringing a pen like this back into working order and using it to be much more pleasurable than, you know, getting a Grail pen, not wanting to leave your site and feeling uncomfortable taking it out in public, and also maybe getting a Grail pen and when you finally have it in your hand and write with it, it doesn't meet your expectations. So, and you have probably spent a fair amount of money acquiring it. So I'd much rather search for a pen that I know has led a pretty tough life, but now it's going to be in good hands and it's going to be loved and enjoyed for what it is, a writing instrument. The cap pulls off. I mean, functionally this pen is in perfect working order, just visually not very interesting. It does post fairly deeply, and that plastic liner inside the cap makes that cap nice and secure. It's a heavy pen. It'll give you those weights, and it does post on the long side even with it posting deeply. And it's not a weight-wise, it's not a pen I would generally post, but it does post if that's what you want to do. It does fit in the hand nicely without posting. We'll give you the lengths of the pen. And that section is a little on the small side. You know, I'll give you the dimensions of the section, but you can hold it anywhere. And where I would hold it is right about here, which is, you know, about 9, a little bit over 9 millimeters, which is on the small side for me, but still usable and very comfortable to write with. And I think that's the real value in this pen, is it is a very comfortable writer. And now it's going to get used for its initial intention of putting ink on paper, and let's look at that. So I could redo this writing and not show you the skipping, but I'd have the pen uncapped for a number of minutes. And it is a dry writer, so it took a while, but once the ink gets flowing, it's a consistent writer. And I still think there's a little bit of grease on this paper. I try to avoid it, but sometimes you can't. But that's what happens. I mean, fountain pens do have inconsistencies to them at some point in time. And this is not a pen I've written with a lot since I inked it up. So you're going to expect it a little bit of break-in time, and I need to get used to this nib. It's a fine nib, bordering on medium. So like I said, this is a pen I have no trouble taking out, using it as an everyday writer. I had to use a cartridge in here to fill it because of that denting on the side. I can't fit a converter in here. It was a tight fit before the dents. But the cartridge works fine. I'm going to fill the cartridge with, you know, my standard hypodermic needle. And that nib really is an impressive looking nib. I know Wasky likes these nibs, and I agree with them. And the way that feed is designed and everything else. I mean, Sheaffer made good writing instruments. So let's take a look at the other Sheaffers in this group. Before we go on to the Connoisseurs, I thought I would throw in this pen. A pen which you haven't seen from me before. Yes, it's a Sheaffer. And they certainly let you know it's a Schafer Lifetime. There's a lot of branding on it at the bottom of the cap. You know, there's some lettering there with Schafer Lifetime. It's a pull-off cap. And there's more branding there at the bottom of the barrel. And they certainly want to let you know it's a Schafer Lifetime. So when I was doing my research on this pen, it was a challenge, because Sheaffer made a phenomenal amount of pens in this style. It's kind of a small, less expensive version of the pen for men from a styling viewpoint. It's an Imperial, I'm pretty certain of that. And it's Imperial 4, but the first Imperial 4s were touchdown fillers, and this is cartridge converters, so that's why the Lifetime is on there. The other Imperial 4s had different branding on the clip. Yeah, the top of the finial is plain. You can see that squared off design. If you go to the bottom of the barrel, it has those nice concentric circles in it, and also that same squared off look, which is first made popular with the PFM pen that Sheaffer came out with. This pen is very light. It will give you those weights. Pull-off cap. It posts deeply and securely, and because that cap is fairly light, this is a pen that just feels good in your hand posted. It will work unposted. It's on that small side as far as unposted, but it does work. So these pens are still around. They run for anywhere from $90 upward. They come in many varieties. They come in many colors. Here's some examples that I found. What I think makes this pen a little bit unique is there's a needle point on there. It's one of the sharpest points I've ever written with. And you got to be careful because that pierces skin fairly easily. The nib is fairly well labeled, which Sheaffer is known for doing. You know, he let you know it's a 14K, and they have USA down at the bottom of the V on that inlaid nib. So originally, when these pens came out, they had 14K nibs, but they were touchdown fillers. And so this pen dates from probably around the mid to late 60s would be my guess. It's hard to narrow it down to something closer, at least I can't, to that date range. Later on, they went to a stainless steel nib, gold-plated nibs, and then in the latter part of the mid to 1990s and us, when Sheaffers were starting to get made in France, they went to an 18-karat nib for their top-of-the-line models. But as a writer's pen, and it's where I think this is the theme that is going to be consistent with this video and these Sheaffer models, and they're all black with gold trim, so that pretty much puts them into that Lasky Squirrel category. So let's take a look at how that nib puts down ink. So I think you heard that nib on paper. I mean, for this type of needlepoint nib, it's about as smooth as you're going to get. Unlike the Targa, this doesn't require any pressure to write, which is good because if you put pressure on it, you'd probably cut into the paper. It'll open up a little bit with more pressure, but it's not something you're going to want to do on a regular basis. So I think we need to compare this nib to the nib on the Targa. Let's compare the two nibs. The one on the bottom is the Imperial 4, and the one on the top is the Targa nib. You can see how it's a little bit wonky, but it still writes okay. And the engraving is similar but not identical, but it certainly brings out the same amount of information, and the Imperial had USA down here at the bottom versus the Targa did not. It's probably 20 years or about separating these two nibs, so Sheaffer certainly did use this style for a long period of time. Looks like they also did some changes to the feed, but it was one of the most beautiful nibs I think ever put into a pen. So here's the Connoisseur. It's an earlier model, looks very similar to the one that I showed in the previous Sheaffer video, but we'll show you the differences between them. Here's the auction that I won, and the price was extremely reasonable. These can sell for upwards of $200 or more dollars. I didn't expect a perfect pen, but it certainly is in good shape and very usable. And the seller threw in some ink cartridges, which he didn't have to, but he did. And inside the pen was an empty cartridge. It didn't take much to flush it out and to get it to be clean. If you look at the pen a little bit close up, it's, you know, it has a little bit of scratches, there's a little bit of dings. It's not perfect, but then I don't expect the pen to be perfect. It has Sheaffer on the clip, which is one of the things that's different between this and the other one. And on the cap band, there is nothing. And then at the bottom is just a black end. The cap comes off with just a minor turn, so I'm going to investigate and see what might be contributing to that factor. It could just be that that cap liner is slid down a little bit, so we'll look at that a little bit more closely. And it has that really nice Schafer nib in it. So this was made in a similar time frame as the Targa, a little bit later, but still similar. And that, the feed is kind of on a vintage style feed, and that nib has a kind of a vintage look to it. My other Connoisseur has a super smooth nib. It's a little interesting to see how this one writes. If we open it up, we'll see this converter, which is one I put in it that I had. And this is a converter that was also of the time, late 1900s, early 2000s that Sheaffer used. So to me, I got this for a very good price. The seller seems to sell a lot of vintage pens, and we'll put a link to the seller up above. The vintage pens, I think, are just slightly off, and that's why I think the pricing is what they are. But to me, I enjoy just getting a piece of history, and I'm very comfortable with working with it to put it into a writing instrument that I can enjoy. So here we can compare my Connoisseur, which I've had for many, many years, to the one I just got from eBay. And right away you'll see that just that Sheaffer that's very nicely done in block lettering on that clip. And then if we look at the cap band, you'll see that there is Sheaffer written on the cap band on the newer one in a nice script form, and then USA. Other than that, they're pretty much identical. It looks like this one could use a little shine, so I'll do my normal magic and put some Renaissance wax when I'm done. This one, the cap takes a little over a turn, so that's what it probably should be like. If we look at the nibs, we'll find that they're very close, if not pretty much almost identical. Interesting to compare their writing styles. Here's the Schafer Connoisseur that I recently got on eBay, disassembled. I'm not going to pull out the nib and feed. It came with an empty cartridge inside. There was a little bit of ink in here. It didn't require a lot of flushing to clean it up. One of the things I did notice, this ring is loose. It fits at the top of that section, so I'm going to clean it up a little bit and put a little dab of glue just to hold it in place. No reason for that to be loose like that. Probably happened over time. I did find a converter to fit, pretty much the same one as it was in the other Connoisseur that I have that we're going to use to compare to this one. And of course the cap. So it's ready for reassembling and eventually inking up. So I'd call these pens paternal twins, separated by a few years. We'll give you the years of manufacturing. And they have so many things in common, more in common than they have not in common. But the main giveaway is the way the Sheaffer is on the clip on the older one and not on the clip on the newer one. They moved it down to the cap band, where there was nothing on the cap band in the older one. But other than that, the pens are identical, just separated by a few traits. Let's see how they write. Well, the Schafer Connoisseur with the medium nib, which is the pen I've had in my collection for a number of years, and for a few years it was my everyday carry. It's definitely incredibly smooth, fairly wet. Both of these have Pilot Blue Black. That's the ink that I've used in all of the Sheaffer pens in this review. The older model, which is the one I bought on eBay, has a fine nib. You can definitely see the difference in the width of that line. It's also another 18 karat nib, and it is smooth, but this is like absolutely super smooth, and this is just pretty smooth. And also lays down less ink, which is kind of what you would expect with a finer nib, that you would get that type of ink line. So we're going to end with these 4 pens. Hopefully you've enjoyed a look at them, seeing how they write, understanding how they ended up in my collection and what I see is good about them. And they're all black. And they're all black with gold. Sheaffer made tremendous varieties of all of these pens, except Connoisseur. They were not as many. So the Targa was well over 100. The Imperial probably was in maybe 50s from its lifespan. They all have a very interesting nib in them. These are more traditional nibs than a Connoisseur. So I think the Connoisseur is kind of a pen that was a little bit late to market. It's an upscale pen that Sheaffer tried to come out with, but kind of a throwback to that vintage style with flat tops and things. And they already had an audience with the PFM style pens and these type of Imperial pens and Triumph pens. Then they had the Targa, which spans kind of very low end, and also the Imperial also had a school pen in addition to the Targa. But I'm happy that all these have 14 karat gold nibs, not necessarily because the gold nibs write better, it's just that they look better, they hold up better over time, and they're much easier to put a little bit of buff on them and make them look really nice and shiny. They all have white dots on them, so they're all lifetime, which had a little bit different meaning, I think, in these pens than it did when it first came out in, I think it was 1927, the white dot was first brought into play as a way of positioning the pen as a lifetime guarantee. And of course, one of the pens I actually put lifetime on the clip. So Sheaffer is still making pens, still making high-end pens in addition to low-end pens, and like with Cross and not so much Parker and not so much Waterman, because they have some higher end pens I think that are still fairly desirable by collectors. Sheaffer and Cross seem to have not maintained their status within the pen community, and I think they're great writers, and that's where I enjoy them. And hopefully you've enjoyed this look at them. So if you reached the end of this video, so thank you for watching. Thank you for coming along. And this is an exercise that you can enjoy while you're staying at home, which is something that we all need to do. And it may be a while until we're able to go out and socialize like we used to do, but we need to make certain that that does happen eventually in the future. So we're going to have to do some things now, hunker down, and watch some videos. So we're going to say the end of the video is now, and we're going to say bye. It's hard for me to do that when I'm not writing it, so bear with me. Bye until the next video. Enjoy your pens, enjoy writing. Hey, now's a good time to send a letter to somebody. Surprise them. Enjoy the day as well as you can.